Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's In Session Live Audio 101. I'm Jen, and I will be your host for today's conversation, where we'll share tips and best practices for the independent musician to get the best sound possible at their next gig. I'm joined today by Jen Kraus and Craig Small. I'll start with you, Jen. Why don't you go ahead, unmute, introduce yourself, tell us your preferred gender pronouns and who you are and what you do.
Cool. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Jen. I am originally from New York, pronouns she, her, and now I'm based in Los Angeles. And so I am a front of house mix engineer out here. And I'm freelance. I work at a lot of different venues. I also have clients that have me come in for them. I do some studio recording as well. Yeah, I've been out here for about 6 months and I'm loving the music scene in LA.
Love it. Amazing. Thanks, Jen. All right, Craig, kick it off.
Hey guys, thanks for having me, Jen. Great to meet you, Jennifer. So my name's Craig. I'm a product line manager for Bose Professional. We design and make portable line array systems, portable PA systems such as L1, F1, and S1. Him are my preferred pronouns. I am also a singer-songwriter, producer, have in a live performer, have toured, shared small stages such like Sofar performers would share. Yeah, that's me.
I love it. So as you can see, we've got a superstar panel today that's going to give you all the tips that you need. But before we get into the conversation, a few housekeeping items to cover. This is a supportive and uplifting space, so we want to keep all dialogue in the chat respectful as we get into the discussion. Please feel free to use the chat to share where you're tuning in from, show your support or connection to the topics that we're discussing. And then when using the chat function, just make sure to check all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see what you're saying or asking. And if you have questions that come up during the webinar, there's a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen for you to submit. So we'll have a moderator helping to gather those questions and we'll answer those toward the end of our session. And then lastly, you'll automatically receive a short survey after the session so that we can get your thoughts and feedback and make these kinds of conversations better for you in the future. So let's just jump right in. And the two of you can feel free to just unmute and let us know your thoughts on any of these things. So I'll start with some key considerations that artists should use when planning to run audio for their own show.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'd say the biggest thing if you're going to be running audio for your own show is to really know your gear inside and out, and to do test runs before you get to the gig. It's just like the number one thing that's going to make things go smoothly once you get to that gig. Try to be able to describe your gear, know the connection points, know the cables that are required, bring extra cables, things like this. They're so simple to overlook, but preparation is key for audio. It's going to save you so much hassle. And if you're an artist, you want to save that energy for your performance, not on your sound check,
Absolutely.
Very good advice. I would add, if it's like a DIY space where you have to bring your own PA system, also be familiar with how big the room is so that you have enough volume to be able to fill the room and so that the audience can hear you. Consider how many audio sources you're going to be plugging in. Is it just an acoustic guitar and a microphone? Are you going to be playing along to tracks? Do you have some loops? Are you miking a kick drum? You would take all those into consideration when you're mixing. You want to make sure you have enough channels on your board, enough microphones, and then all that combined with enough SPL volume to be able for your audience to be able to hear you.
Absolutely. And it sounds like the main tip is you're an artist, so the last thing you want to have to worry about is your sound. So just giving you one less thing to stress about, right? If you have the extra cable, you don't have to think, oh, this is an act have a quarter inch that I can borrow or an XLR. I got it on hand, and then just creating a little bundle for yourself that you just grab and go, right? I love that.
That's
yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned the word stress, Jen. Like that setup before a gig getting to and setting up for the gig is by far the most stressful part of the gig for a performer, singer-songwriter, or any musician. It's when you get into the gig and you start performing, that's the payoff. That's when it's all good. So anything you can do to relieve some of that pressure, that stress up front, is just going to make for a more enjoyable gig.
I love that. And Craig, you mentioned if you're playing to tracks, so let's talk about that. If I'm a singer and I have tracks, we are talking about Sofar shows here, for instance, intimate setup. I might want to just be able to take myself on the road. What's a great audio setup for somebody who is just triggering tracks and potentially only having like maybe one other instrument or just a microphone? If you want to start us off, Craig.
Yeah. So as product line manager at Bose Professional, I'm partial to the Bose system. So we have a few solutions. These are called portable line array systems, where it's a subwoofer and then a column speaker. I actually have one right here. The benefit of those systems is you don't need a monitor. It's a line source system, so it's not screaming loud. It actually propagates sound very efficiently from the source all the way to the sort of the edges of the venue, versus like a point source system, which is just a single speaker mounted on like a tripod. Those have to be really loud in order to propagate sound throughout the room. So this lets you, like, you can have a microphone in front of it, it won't feed back. There's also 180 degrees of room coverage. So you can, if it's up against the wall, you can cover an entire room. It's also super portable. So if I'm, a solo singer-songwriter or a duo, we will kill ourselves to take as few trips as possible from the car to the venue and then back at night. So it's just really, really easy to transport and super simple setup. So specifically, like the L1 Pro 8 or L1 Pro 16 are good systems for plugging in some backing tracks. L1 Pro 16 has got a little bit bigger subwoofer, so you get a lot more low-end content. Some of those backing tracks have some low bass lines. And then it's got a 3-channel mixer. You can plug in your microphone, EQ it, and also your acoustic guitar as well.
Nice. Yeah, there's nothing worse than like hearing a track the way you want it in your headphones or in your home studio and then taking it to the gig and being like, you guys can't even hear the bass. So yeah, and I think one thing that a lot of artists fight with is, a lot of speakers are very directional. And so you're either making sure the audience can hear you well or making sure you can hear yourself well. And this sounds like a great solution. So Jen, what about you? Any tips for folks trying to trigger tracks and sing along or play along?
Yeah, totally. I was checking out those the liners, and they are super cool that you can actually plug your inputs straight into them. And if you don't have that, you'll need something to work your tracks off of your computer from, and like a mixer or an interface, right? That's going to be like your number one thing if you don't have that accessibility on the speaker itself, like these Bose columns. So you'll need a mixer or some kind of interface for your inputs. If you are coming out of your computer, so like, let's say you have your Ableton track or something, one thing I like to suggest to people, I don't love the feel of like looking at my computer screen and like clicking my space bar to like play my triggers. So I kind of, I'll get like a small little trigger pad, like a MIDI trigger pad, and through just USB into the computer, I'll have that either next to me, or you can get something that's on the ground and trigger it with your foot if you are like standing and playing guitar while you're triggering samples or beats. Mm-hmm. And that to me is like a little bit more user friendly, and it looks like a little calmer on stage to use a MIDI trigger for playback. So if you're starting your track, you're just kind of like, boom, go. It's a little bit cleaner of a workflow. So I like to introduce that as well if I'm playing songs off of my computer.
I love that. I love the idea of a trigger pad. And it's funny, we see a lot of, especially singers nowadays, using like Boss loop pedals, for instance, and you can get creative. Like they're meant, I think, for the ground, but then like a lot of people have stands now, and you can be triggering things with your hands. So it's dependent on your setup. So using that and customizing it to your needs. If you're somebody who's playing guitar, you're probably going to want your trigger pad on the ground. If you're somebody who's singing using a microphone, you might want to get a stand. So these are great tips. So I appreciate both of y'all. Is this setup something that's going to change drastically for piano or guitar if I'm somebody who's doing more of a traditional setup?
You'll just need to make sure that you have enough inputs on whatever mixer or interface you're using. So just be like really knowledgeable about, if I have a keyboard that has stereo output, I want to hear the left, right, pan, then that's 2 channels. I'm also playing a guitar and it's running through a DI, that's a 3rd channel, and I have a microphone, that's 4 channels. So just make sure I have 4 channels of audio here. Do I have enough inputs? What's my mixer? What's my capacity at? So just being really aware of, like, again, like Craig said, your source, and, you know, where am I going with this source? And do I have enough processing for it, or channels for it, I should say.
Yeah, wow. Those inputs can really add up fast. So by the time you've got your simple setup, it's almost time to expand already, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, also just going back to the size of the system, like if you're playing keys or bass guitar, or even, you know, backing tracks. I know I already said this, but you want to make sure that you have enough, your frequency response is low enough so that you can hear. Like the worst thing is playing, you know, left-handed keyboard parts, you know, with all the low notes, and they sound really thin coming out of this little small speaker.
Mhm.
So make sure that your subwoofer is big enough to be able to handle those big low notes.
Mhm. Absolutely. Now, we're kind of talking in the context of intimate shows, which we love, but what happens when we start to go to bigger venues and we're still technically in charge of providing our own sound? Like, for instance, you know, I could still be a DIY musician, but going to like a college cafeteria or like student center that's a little larger. What do you recommend in that case, and how does my setup start to change then?
So
Yeah, Greg, this is you. PA.
sure, yeah.
PA.
So do you guys mind if I share my screen for a little bit?
Please do. Love it.
So I keep talking about these the Bose portable line array systems. From left to right here, you can see we've got the oops. So this is the L1 Pro 8. This is the smallest system, best for like really intimate venues. This is the L1 Pro 16. There's a 7 by 13 inch subwoofer here. L1 Pro 16 has got a 10 by 18 inch subwoofer, which is equivalent to about a 15 inch traditional round subwoofer. Pretty big and not very portable. But this is a nice slim compact package that allows still just one person in and out. The L1 Pro 32 would be best for the gigs that you just mentioned, Jen, because we've got 32 drivers here from basically floor to ceiling in a straight line array. And that helps to propagate sound really far in very big spaces. And those get paired with either the sub 2 or the sub 1 here. If it's a really big room and you want to get that low end content, you'd want to use the sub 2, which utilizes the same 10 by 18 inch subwoofer. And then the sub 1 is a little bit more portable. The 7 by 13, good enough for miking a kick drum. But if you've got multiple sources with some low content, like backing tracks, like the kick drum, even a bass guitar, even, you probably want to go with the sub 2. Another solution are, this is where you see more traditional pole-mounted speakers, one on each end of the stage. When you have those types of setups, then you're also going to want monitors, because those are too loud to be in front of a microphone. The beauty of the L1 systems is that they can be kind of behind you, off to the side, and you can actually hear that direct feed. So you don't need a separate monitor mix. You hear what the audience is hearing. It's a nice sort of unity vibe. So you can sort of hear the music as it was intended. The audience hears it as intended. Sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between the mix that's going out to the audience, what's coming out in your monitor. Sometimes it's just your vocals or just your guitar, so that you can hear yourself, and what's happening in your head. Unless you work with great front of house engineers like Jennifer, who's going to make sure that the audience hears everything as well as it could sound. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's good to know how to do it on your own for sure. And a quick question, are the inputs plugging into the back of that subwoofer there? Where are they actually plugging in?
Yeah, so the L1 Pro series, they do have mixers. I'll show you a quick image of the back of the unit. You guys see that?
Yes.
So you can see Sorry, it's a little clunky here. My screen sharing is not you. You can see just the whole thing's got 3 channels, 1, 2, and 3, the clear channel delineation. You can plug, it's a combo jack, so you can plug a 1/4-inch guitar input or XLR microphone input. There's also phantom power if you're using more expensive, more sensitive condenser microphones. There's bass and treble as well as reverb. You can also connect what we call a tone match mixer to a tone match port, and it gives you 4 or 8 additional channels that you can add to that, but still very compact and easy to use.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely giving an all-in-one vibe. I really like how the inputs are right here in the back. You don't need a separate mixer. It's great. You're making a great case for this, Craig.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right, so let's zoom out a little bit. Say that I'm an artist. Let's say I'm singing and playing guitar, and it's my first gig running sound on my own. What do you recommend? What's some of, like, if you want to go through maybe a checklist or just like a sanity check of what I might need to prepare for that first gig?
Okay, so don't forget about power. Start from the ground up. How are you going to power all of your stuff? Get as many tech specs from the space as you can. So if you're talking to someone and you're like the production manager or whoever is from the space, you're going to want to know, like, where's my power source? Like Craig said, how big is the space? And really just get to know what you need. Start with power. They could provide it, but if they don't, just have it. Have some nice long 50 feet extension cords, things like that you don't think about. Bring extra cables. Know what cables you need ahead of time, and bring extras. Like, the number one thing that goes wrong in a live show is that your cable craps out. It happens all the time. It happens more than you think. Or there's buzz or hum and you need to fix it. Bring extra. So definitely have those 2 things on the checklist. And then I would say, just give yourself more time than you think. Give yourself 2 hours or so. Try to bring a friend. It's always good to have like another person to these are simple things, right? But like to bounce ideas off of while you're trying to do this for yourself, or to just troubleshoot something because you're not thinking of the one silly thing. Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah. Power, extra cables, and know what you need ahead of time, for sure.
Yeah, man, extension cord is huge, right? Because you might be like, I wouldn't have had to be in a small little corner if I had just like 10 more feet, right?
That's simple, I know.
I like the bring a friend suggestion, because if you're setting up by yourself and you're doing your own sound, that could be a recipe for disaster because you don't know what it sounds like out there. So you set up your PA, and if you can, you want to stream some tracks through the system so that you can kind of walk the room and hear what it sounds like out there. Ideally, you could maybe you could play back a recording of yourself, like a rehearsal recording or something that's somewhat representative of what you're going to sound like on stage. If you have somebody there to help you out, you could plug in your sources, get a level on your acoustic guitar, get a level on your microphone, run through a song or 2, and it's going to change once all the bodies get in the room. What sounds great during a sound check sometimes just changes drastically once there are people in the room. People absorb frequencies, so EQs have to change. Sometimes volumes have to change. And I would say this to artists also, like, you can kind of playfully educate your audience. Like, if you're doing sound for your own show, like, the audience kind of loves that level of detail, right? Like, let them know that, like, if something doesn't sound right or if they can't hear something, let me know after this next song, like, and I'll go make a tweak because I'm doing my own sound today. You can turn that negative into like just some sort of like interaction with your audience.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. People love being a part of the DIY moment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So then once we've got these basics set up, I've done a couple of gigs now with my little acoustic and my microphone. What are some easy add-ons? Like for me, I think one thing I see sometimes is like a little stereo mic that people will put, because I know like you'll record a live show and then you'll have the feed from the soundboard, for instance, but you won't hear the audience and it sounds kind of weird. Like a song ends, you don't hear clapping. So what are some other like fun add-ons that you can start to like piece by piece as you save away that you can add to your setup as you become more advanced?
You can, well, I'll go first. I don't know if you wanted to chime in, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Upgrading your microphones, like the stereo mic is a great idea to capture your live performance. But if you're always using, nothing wrong with the Shure SM57, but it's a dynamic microphone, step it up to a condenser microphone that does require phantom power, but it's just going to give you, it's a lot more dynamic and can capture a lot more pristinely. Effects pedals are an awesome way to, we already talked about them a little bit, just to kind of add some color to a solo acoustic performer, for example. And then there's also like, just like not a real kick drum pedal, but like a percussion pedal where you can tap your foot and you get like this kick drum sound out to the audience. Just as a whole other layer to the solo performance.
Yeah, I love that the system that you're talking about, Craig, has the ability for phantom power, because with a lot of these other sound systems, you're limited to the mics that might not be as higher end, or just not providing enough power. So yeah, Jen, do you want to chime in there at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the pedal idea, especially on a DIY, because so let's talk about EQ a little bit. If you don't know what it is, it's kind of, it can be corrective in a lot of live settings, and it's basically signal processing. So whatever input is coming from your vocal mic or your guitar line or something, it needs to sort of be EQ'd to fit the room. If you're not necessarily have a mixer that has like a lot of EQ control on it, my number one thing is like, get a different sound for that vocal, get a distortion pedal, do something fun with it, get a harmonizer and do something fun. You might not sound as pristine as you do on your album in a small setup. It just might not, be the case. It's going to sound more like live. Have fun with your vocal, let it sound a little bit live, let it sound different. And those pedals are an awesome way to do that. If you can, as you start to grow, if you can get into a little bit higher quality signal processing and higher quality preamps, that's the amplification stage that hits your inputs before it goes to your volume knob or your volume fader. If you can put a little bit of money into higher quality preamps and signal processing, then that's gonna like really change the game for you. So I know Craig mentioned the mixer that Bose has, the tone match, right? And so it's like 8 inputs, it's like more. There's tons of those out there. There's one that QSC makes that's really cool called Touch Mix. It can come in as low as 8 channels or up to, I think, 24. I'm not really sure how many, but they stay small. They're like an iPad. And then in that processing, you have a nice high quality preamp, and you can actually like really get into some finer tuning of an EQ, finer tuning of that reverb, and really sort of like, just upgrade that processing.
Nice. And what I love about this is that you can start with your system and then you can add on pieces. You can add on like a preamp for your guitar and for your vocals and things like that. So I love that it's something that you can slowly build on, whether that's financial or whether that's just learning the system that you have before moving on, right?
Right.
Cool. So let's talk about, I've graduated now. I now can hire an audio engineer so that I don't have to worry about, like we said, the stress of trying to set up your own sound. What are your thoughts on when to graduate to that stage? When do you feel like you need an audio engineer as a part of your setup? Bringing my own gear, however, I need somebody that's gonna just focus on that part of it, and that friend might then graduate to being an audio engineer, right? So when should I make that jump?
Yeah, that's definitely going to be different for everybody. And I feel like it has to do with the quality of your experience as an artist, honestly. If you can walk into a show and handle your audio and have a great show at a high level, by all means do it. But if you are at a space where you want to play and you want to just be thinking about the music, then grab that engineer and have them come no matter how small the setup is. So it's really sort of, it's more about you and your level of comfort with the gear that you have. Naturally, as things start to expand, let's say you have a full band and you want to mic the whole drum kit. Okay, it's time for an engineer. Like it's just, you need those ears out in the audience helping you, and you'll probably need a monitor mix for potentially different monitor mixes for every band member. So as you graduate to bigger setups, I mean, the time really does come where you need an extra set of hands and professional ears.
Yeah. Great. Craig, anything to add there?
Just sometimes as it applies to the smaller rooms, like what Jennifer said about the bigger rooms and miking a drum set, absolutely 100%. You need help for you to perform and sound your best. For smaller rooms, the reality sometimes is it comes down to how much the gig pays and how much you can afford to pay a sound person. Oftentimes you just can't make that sacrifice. But I guess also to Jen's point, consider the level of performance. If this is like a really important show, and even if you can't afford to, you really need the cash from the gig. But it's better long term if you sacrifice some of that income to have a sound person there, just to kind of be your safety net and to make sure that everything sounds great. So it's really like sort of scaling up or scaling down based on the importance of the gig. Not that, I mean, every gig is important, right? But sometimes you're in front of an audience that you never had the opportunity to play in front of before, and you really need to make a good impression. Yeah.
Nice. All right, so you all have been on a lot of different sides of this, I'm sure some studio work, audio engineer work, you're both artists. So what is it that you, as an audio engineer, would need the artist to provide you before jumping into a gig? Like even for instance, for your setup, Craig, like we might see these in some Sofar rooms soon. Like, what do I need to tell you so that you're ready? Even if the setup is as simple as that, and I love that the Bose system is really plug and play, but what would I need to tell you before I walk into that room?
You would give me, in a bigger venue, you'd have a stage plot, which just shows where each member is and like what is going to go into the board. This is like the mini version of a stage plot. Like, what are your sources? Is it just a microphone and an acoustic guitar? Do you have keys? Is there like a background vocal section? And a set list is helpful too, even though I may have never heard this artist before and I don't know any of the songs. Like, you can draw the line when this song, you just know where you are in the set, and any notes, like at the beginning of this song, I'm going to tell a story. It's just so that like the sound person is prepared to maybe kill the reverb on a mic, so that you're not like, in a grand hall telling a story in a small room, so to speak. Any little cues that you can give to the sound person, and also just be cool, like you guys, we're all in this together. So like they want you to succeed and you want them to succeed. So let's do this together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Jen?
Oh man, I want to add something that I see all the time. So if you have an audio engineer and they're coming in and they're going to help you with your sound check or something, try to mimic the dynamic range of what you do in your performance at sound check. I love in such a like dear to my heart. I have artists that come up and they'll kind of like, hey, how's it going? Hey, check 1 2, and then they come up and they scream. They're like a punk band, and he's screaming the whole time, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're going with screaming. So like dynamic range, especially if you're triggering samples and you have a lot of different samples going on, like run through them at sound check. Just kind of like listen to them all. They could be wildly different. Maybe they're even different in volume. So your engineer is going to want to know like literally how loud do you get and how soft do you get, so I have an idea of the dynamic range of your performance. Big.
Absolutely.
Also, Jennifer, hopefully you can appreciate this. Remember the sound person's name. Just remember their name, because during a performance you will say their name into the microphone, and ask for something. There's nothing worse than saying, "Hey, sound person," into the microphone. Like,
Yeah. Same goes for me. I try not to say, "Hey, drummer."
yeah,
They
yeah.
don't like that either.
I love that advice. It's like a small thing and it's huge, right? Because it's just like the respect that you're showing to the audio engineer as somebody who's like practicing their craft, right? Great advice, great advice. Okay, so let's get to some tough stuff. What I know we've touched on it a little bit, like don't forget your extension cord. What are some mistakes that you've made while running live sound that people should try and avoid? Whether that's like, don't forget to turn on phantom power, don't forget to plug in whatever, the mixer, you know what I mean? You're just like, you spend half an hour troubleshooting and something's not plugged in. So what are some mistakes like that that you would imagine people would be checking off as they look to like troubleshoot?
Mm. So I think the biggest thing that we all fear is feedback. So the Bose system sounds amazing because it almost sounds like it's feedback proof. I mean, you're talking about condenser mics in a live setting. That's like, you know, but if you don't have a system that is going to be quite as nice to you, then some key things that you're going to want to remember is that do not set up your vocal mics in front of the PA. It's going to be a lot harder, especially if you have minimal EQ, to help you correct some of those things. So set up your PA and then set up your microphones behind on the stage, right? From performer perspective behind that PA. Try and, you know, so there's in your microphone, right? The back of your microphone is rejecting sound. So if you set up a monitor, set that up right behind where there's the maximum rejection of your microphone. So if your monitor is on this side, it's still perhaps going to have a chance of feedback here. It's still picking up what this monitor is putting down. So try and get that behind for where it's fully rejecting. Yeah, those are some big things. And then also, yeah, like if you're troubleshooting, start at the source, like where is this sound coming from? Where is this acoustic sound coming from? And travel that signal path. So when you're troubleshooting, like don't get flustered, start with where the source is coming from and check that everything is plugged in and go from point A, from the source all the way to the PA, like calmly. And you will be able to figure it out in less than 5 minutes. If it's in the middle of the show, I know it feels insane and you are flustered and something is wrong and you need to fix it, but just go from that source to the PA and work your way down that signal chain and you'll find it.
Woo, gems. The feedback thing is huge because I think a lot of people who haven't necessarily ever done their own sound, they'll spend time at the board trying to figure out feedback when they could just reposition their microphone, right? That's huge. And people like, you know, it's almost like a trope of live sound. Like if you hear somebody bombing on stage, you hear that feedback sound, right? And it can be very, yeah, exactly. It can be such an easy thing to fix. So thank you for that, gem. Yeah. Craig?
Yeah, 100% right in the microphone placement as it applies to the like traditional point source speakers. Just to go back to the Bose L1 Pro line, I'll just share a quick image here. They are not feedback proof, but they're very resistant to feedback. So you can actually have a microphone as long as it's not right in front of the speakers. There are at the top of that column, there are 8 speakers in a C-shaped array. They're articulated. That's your mid and high end, and then the bottom is the subwoofer. So because of that line source technology that I mentioned at the beginning of the call, it's less screaming loud at the source, but yet still propagates throughout the room. So that's why it's mostly feedback resistant. Again, you still can't put a microphone right in front of it, so you do have to be mindful of mic placement. Another common mistake that I have seen is it's called gain staging. So if you are using even your acoustic guitar, if you're plugged directly into the PA and you have it cranked and then you strum really hard, you're going to hear this distortion. Whereas if you just backed off the volume on your guitar a little bit and cranked it up at the mixer, it would be much cleaner. You have more headroom. Same thing goes for like vocal effects pedals, guitar effects pedals. If you have the level on those pedals really hot, you're sending a really hot signal into your PA. And once it starts to distort, like the mixer can't do anything about that. So you have to just make sure that you have enough headroom in your guitars and your pedals and things that are plugged into the board.
Absolutely. I think people's tendency is just like, let's just make it louder and like, let's figure out where we are. Like a gain staging, perfect, because you want to start so high, but it's like, what's your master fader at? You know what I mean? Like, let's just, it's better to start quiet and make room from there, right? Especially if you, as you're adding instruments, like Jen said, when we start to add a drum kit, kick drum alone is blowing us out, right? And then the vocalist is going to want to sing loud. So like, let's start small, right? And then move from there. And as you mentioned, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jen.
Yeah.
One more thing is just like sort of like planning for the worst. So if you are doing your own sound, like, and something happens, like have a plan to get to the mixer so that you can kind of make a quick tweak if you need to. Just at the very least be aware of where it is, or designate someone in the band to like be the go-to person. Sorry, I keep going back to the Bose product, but the L1 series they have a mixing app, so you can actually have the mixer in your back pocket. So if you need to turn something down, sort of, in the thick of it, you can just pull it out and make adjustments right there, kind of on the fly. That's for the mixer that's on the L1s. Obviously, if you're using a bigger mixing board, that may or may not be an option depending on the brand of the mixer and whether they have remote options. But the key is here, like, just be prepared to make some adjustments.
Yeah. And the more shows I see the iPad audio engineer nowadays. I'm like, this is great. The future is bright, right? All right, so let's talk about, I'm having a show and I want to grab the sound for that because I'm filming and I want to sync the audio later. What do you provide to the audio engineer? Do you recommend a USB stick? Like, what are the things that you need to have prepared walking in? And I think you both want to reiterate the fact that we'd want to email the venue and the audio engineer beforehand if possible, but if not, what should I just bring along with me?
Hard drive. These are, if it's an audio file of an entire show, that's going to be a pretty big file. So just want to make sure you have enough space.
Yeah.
Yeah, make sure that hard drive might be empty or already formatted. So if I'm using a soundboard and I'm going to take your hard drive and plug it in, it needs to be formatted correctly, and you can check with the audio engineer like what that is. But if you're bringing me like your hard drive with like your new album on it, like don't do that. Don't bring anything important on that hard drive. Bring it clean and formatted. If it doesn't have USB, like an analog mixer, right? Tascam and Zoom make recorders, like 2-channel recorders, left, right. They can run like $100-$150. They're not that expensive. Grab one of those and a couple XLR cables, and then you would be able to get like an actual analog, like, feed from submix from the boards from somewhere.
Nice. All right. So I think I know what Craig's going to say, but tell me what you'd recommend for your favorite system for like a moderate budget or a larger budget. Yeah.
Oh, I can't pick it. That's like choosing your favorite kid, right? I guess I'll play it safe and go right down the middle, the L1 Pro 16, because it's still super portable, but yet it's quite loud. It's got 16 drivers in the mid-high array, and it's got a big subwoofer that'll go down to 40 hertz, that 10 by 18 inch sub, which is the equivalent to a 15 inch sub, like I mentioned, which if you were to carry that in and out of a venue, it's usually a 2-person carry. But with the L16, it's this taller, slimmer shape, so you can just pick it up and hold it next to your body, and it's not light, but it's a significantly easier carry than an actual 15 inch.
Nice. Jen?
So just to counter that, I was checking out the Bose stuff. It is like so portable. And the columns sound really good. I've used them before. If I say something besides that, I would say Electro Voice. I just like how they sound, and they're affordable. They also have like a ton of power. So this would be a point source PA that you would have to like really kind of like hone in that feedback and all that stuff. But yeah, they make like 12 and 15 inch woofers. So if you didn't have a ton of bass, you could still get away with no sub, with like 2 of those on sticks, and you would crank out a ton of sound for even a large space. They have, just a lot of power behind them. So those are cool. I honestly my mind just goes to like line arrays at big venues and stuff. So I think Craig probably has the right thinking for smaller shows there.
Nice. And then Craig, for that sub, do you know how many pounds if somebody wanted to kind of carry that on their own?
Yeah,
Off topic.
the whole system, just the subwoofer itself is it's about 55 pounds. And then the whole system is about just over 60 pounds together. So it's a two-person carry, or two-handed carry. Subwoofer in one hand, and then the mid-high array in the other hand.
Nice. You might want to get a cart or something if you have other things to carry, which I'm sure you might during the day of your show.
Yeah. Jennifer mentioned line arrays, like when you go to a big show and you see the line arrays hanging from the sides of the stage. That's basically what these systems are. They're just mini line arrays packed into a little small space. They utilize, they're coupled together to propagate that sound. So it's the same approach to sound propagation.
Gotcha. All right, so I want to put a call to action for those who are in the chat. If you have any questions for these two amazing panelists, feel free to throw them in there. We'll hop on over to questions in a minute for the last bit of our webinar. But I do want to touch on streaming a bit, just because as we're coming out of the pandemic, that's been a huge thing. And now what we're seeing is people wanting to combine their live shows with their live stream, right? So what do you recommend to just make that the best audio quality for their stream? What are some tips that you have there?
I loved what you said earlier, Jen, about adding stereo room mics. So basically these are two mics that pick up the crowd sound. And so for live streaming, you wouldn't put those mics in the PA. You would leave them out of the PA. You would put them into the mix that is going to go to broadcast. And it just like gives that, live feel. And it's that thing where if it's not there, it feels weird. And when it's there, you don't notice it. So that'll kind of like give a good vibe for your broadcast. If you have a like more scaled up, more in-depth type of live stream, let's say there's a paywall behind it and you want some really high quality audio, I would recommend trying to see if you can make a broadcast mix. This would be a separate mix than the left-right mix for the PA. Things like a little bit more compression or a little bit less reverb might be things that happen in a broadcast mix as opposed to your left-right PA mix. And that would either happen by the engineer creating a different mix during sound check and sending it off to a bus that you record, or it would happen by taking the inputs of your mix and splitting them, and the inputs go to one mixer for the PA and then go to separately for a broadcast mix. So that would just be kind of, extra, but in a good way. It would sound dope.
Yeah, and if you got the budget there, and if you something that you're investing in, especially if you have professional videographers there, it's something you might want to invest in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Craig, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would just I love the idea of having a room mic, whether it's a stereo mic or just even a mono microphone somewhere in the room to give you a little bit of that live ambience. Sometimes it can sound a little cold if you're just singing directly into your DAW or playing acoustic guitar into your DAW. It just sounds a little harsh. That the room sound, the room ambience just kind of softens everything and makes it feel just a lot warmer. And then just to add to that, I guess, me personally, I would, if sometimes less is more. So maybe you don't need, if it's just you and an acoustic guitar, maybe it's just a room mic somewhere. You don't necessarily need to mic your vocals and mic your guitar. Just like get that room sound and just keep it simple. If you can hear yourself and you, obviously you've done some sort of checking beforehand so that you know that what you're playing in the room, don't overthink it, I guess is really what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know you mentioned a Bose app that you can use in conjunction with this system. Are there any other apps that you recommend for either not having to align my audio later or something that makes it easier to line up my audio to my video for additional content later down the road?
So the Bose app, it's called L1 Mix. It's purely a mixing application for for the L1 systems. OBS makes some great stuff. Broadcast quality that is really easy to work with. Wondershare Filmora does a great job of kind of matching up frames per second with real-time audio. Sometimes, like iMovie, sometimes it's a little tricky because the video doesn't always line up with, because the frames per second is sort of fixed and it doesn't line up with your the audio that you captured. Wondershare, it's pretty inexpensive, and it offers lots of editing. It's not as, it's no Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, but it does a great job.
Nice. Anything to add there, Jen?
In terms of syncing, yeah, if you're in like a professional video software at the end of your, editing process, there's a few things already there. I think in Premiere Pro, like merging and like syncing, that are little tricks that can help you get that video and audio aligned. If you can't, then just really, master the slate. That's the thing that, it's a clap or it's a clapboard or something, and that's the manual way. And honestly, it might be tedious with a multicam operation, but for something like a show, you're just using like that straight audio. You're not like cutting between audio. So once you line it up in the beginning, if everything continues rolling, you should be good.
Yeah, I love that. And for those of you listening, if you just have a clap or like a little slate at the beginning, it can do wonders for syncing later. Just that one little moment can just change everything in your trajectory of editing for like hours and hours, right?
Yep.
I love that.
The easiest foolproof way.
I love that advice. I want to grab this question from Jonathan in the chat. I'll read it for you. Hi, all. Thanks for this discussion. Would like to know your best practices for band sound checks, order of instruments, i.e. drums first, vocals last. Also, any tips on how to ensure the best front of house sound when working with an engineer you've worked with before, especially when mixing multiple vocals? So either of you can start there.
Sure, I'll jump in. Best practices for sound check. Be on time. If you're late, it's just going to add more stress. So do whatever you can to use the full time of your sound check. Be ready to go. I'm doing my best to stay on time for sure. Order of instruments. I like to get vocal mics up first so that they can talk to me. And then I'll have my Talkback in their monitors. And then I go back and I work my way through the drum set and then bass and then any other instruments. And then I go back to them playing a full song and getting the actual mix in order. As I'm going through, if you have a dedicated monitor engineer, as you go through every input, you're going to be like raising your hand if you need that input in your monitor mix, and that engineer will put it there for you. And then you can direct your questions to them at the time. So that's something that happens in conjunction with a front of house sound check. Your monitor is being built as you go through the inputs. And then I think I forgot the last part of that question. I hope I answered that for you, Jonathan.
Yeah, any tips on how to ensure the best for you? Yeah, you kind of grabbed it. Yeah, especially when mixing multiple vocals. Yeah. Greg?
Yeah, I'll defer to Jennifer, since this is what she does for a living, and she obviously knows what she's talking about. Regarding the last part of Jonathan's question, just because I sing in a band that has lots of background vocals, and the best way to ensure great live background vocals or multiple vocals at one time is to do a good sound check and have the right monitor levels. Sometimes if I'm singing with two other vocalists, I need to be able to hear those two other vocalists in my monitor. And those two other vocalists also need to hear the other two that are not them. That can, if you don't hear them, then sometimes you will oversing. So that has a tendency to make you go sharp. You could undersing because you're not sure what everyone else is hearing. That'll make you go flat. So if you can hear, that just ensures a more confident performance, which ultimately will lead to a better show, and your audience will dig those background vocals even more.
Absolutely. And then in terms of like Setlist, have you had any experience in having a sound check song? Like, do you recommend that where it's like maybe just 1 or 2 minutes where you're like everybody's active at one point, where you can kind of see like what that's like?
Yeah, I use a song that has some dynamics, like, so there's maybe a quiet verse and then a sort of a bombastic chorus, just so that the engineer can hear you at your loudest. Or sometimes sound check loud isn't the same as showtime loud, but you're at least in the ballpark.
Absolutely. And definitely, like you mentioned, making sure that, Jen, you said that you're at the same level, and you, Craig, as you just mentioned. And also, I know one thing I've noticed is sound checks might be like 5 o'clock for your 9 o'clock show, but it's worth it, right? Like, bring everybody and sound check and go to get dinner, right? Because if you don't bring your drummer to sound check, then there's no point. Yeah.
Also, if you have a component in your mix that you think is like just happens one time, or it's just the intro, and you kind of like in your mind don't think it's important, like mention it anyway. I love like a surprise trumpet, but let us know, like let us know that something is gonna like pop out in the last song for 30 seconds. Like I would like to know.
Especially trumpet, where they barely need a microphone at all, right? And if they have something in front of them, they're gonna blow the system out, right?
Yeah, you see them reach into your bag, they're like, what are they getting? It's like, oh, it's brass. Oh god.
I love it.
They pull out an acoustic guitar and they didn't mention it in sound check, and you don't have a DI set up.
Right.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah, and it's things that people think, well, it's not a big deal, or I don't really need it mic'd, right? So yeah, it's such great advice. Like, give the sound engineer every element of what you're working with, because no matter how big or small, you're going to want to accommodate that, right?
Right.
I love that. Before we hop off here, if there are no more questions, I'd love for you to tell people where to find you, any projects that you're working on. Craig, you mentioned your band. We'd love for you to plug that so we can check you out and give you some streams. Let us know where we can find you and support you.
Cool. So for the Bose stuff, you can go to bose.com, and then you click on the portable PA category of products under speakers. You can see all about the L1 series, as well as the super popular S1 and our F1, plus the tone match mixers that we talked about. My band is called Airport. We were nominated for a Boston Music Award for Best for Americana Act of the Year. So go to bostonmusicawards.com and vote for Airport. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Bandcamp, all the usual places.
Boom. Love that. And we'll definitely include a link for the Bose system in our follow-up email as well, so don't worry about that. We got you. And
Cool.
Jen, where can we find you and support you?
Well, I usually let people know what I'm doing through my Instagram handle, which is visitor.sound. So come check me out on there, hit me up, DM. I'm always down for consultations if you have questions. I also teach something similar to this, where I like to empower artists to really like get the best sound from their studio sessions and their live gigs. So I have, it's called Talkback. It is kind of like a workshop for artists. And I have one coming up in January, so you can follow me and stay tuned for that. And if you are in Los Angeles, come to the Terragram Ballroom or the Echo or the Echoplex or the Regent Theater and come check out a show. I might be there mixing it.
I love that. And I have attended the Talkback, and I can attest to it. It's a great session and a very supportive and uplifting space. So definitely follow at visitor.sound for more information. I might be at the January one. But this has been such a great session. I really appreciate y'all for providing your expertise and just great energy. And I think that people will get a lot of good tips from this. So thank you for being here. And we'll see y'all at the next one.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you, Craig. Thank you so far, and for all your questions. I hope it was beneficial.
Same. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.